Please welcome director, producer, Lucy Walker. It's live.
Hello.
Thanks for being here, Lucy.
Thank you. I love this theater, and I'm so impressed that people came out, and I'm so happy to be here, and thank you.
And we're so happy to have you here. I told you when I saw you outside that one of the things that is remarkable about your documentary is how it goes in directions that we don't expect it. Can you tell us about that? Is that something that you discovered as you were preparing the work? I
think the film took me on a journey, and actually the journey kind of really began here. Is Holly Becker in the audience?
Yes.
Yes. She's being very shy at the back there. Holly's one of our amazing producers and a dear old friend of mine who lives around here, and I was very worried about her and her family during the Thomas fire. And the journey of making the film really, I kind of tipped over the edge to starting making this film, having kind of incubated for a long time on why isn't there a film about the wildfires and who's going to make that? And during the Thomas fire, I was so worried about Holly and her family members. And Holly also has a family member who's a firefighter. So it was both the residents and the responders that I was really thinking so much about. And actually Linda Weinman, whose incredible theater renovation we're sitting in, was she chair or something?
The chair of the board of directors.
Yeah, and she actually initially helped me begin as well. But I feel like the film actually originally began as a short film about the Thomas fire, which of course was right here, right? And I thought, well, I'll just do a case study about that fire, and that would be a good way of kind of containing or just focusing such a big issue. And that was, almost 4 years ago. And so it was a real journey of realizing that it wasn't just climate change, which had been my original assumption, and that with the Thomas fire, as I mentioned in the film, as I began to make the film about the Thomas fire, the short film about the Thomas fire, there was already an even bigger one, the Mendocino complex fire that happened that summer. And I thought, well, why has there already been a bigger one? I've got to get to the bottom of the big picture, as I mentioned. And that sort of just gradual unfolding and realizing that I'd really bitten off more than I could chew. And it's a tough film to organize. It's much easier to make a film about one person or one thing or one story or one day. It was really challenging to actually take on that challenge of, sorry, I'm a bit tired, forgive me. But it was a real tall order to get to the bottom of these wildfires. I'd really cut that work out for myself, hadn't I? And yet I felt really committed to that. Once I thought, gosh, somebody's really got to really get this right. There's too many lives and properties at stake to not do this real justice. And yeah, it took me on this big journey and sort of around these corners. And but I also kind of like films that are a little bit unexpected because, we kind of know the basics, right? There's lots of fires, they're terrifying, and there's lots to worry about. And there's lots of things that we could say that perhaps are a bit more expected, but I kind of feel like it's important to pay closer attention, perhaps, than that. And also I kind of like saving things, with the film. It's a long one as well. It's by far the longest film I've made. And I just couldn't simplify it more. Mm-hmm. I felt that this was all really important. So thanks for sitting through the longest film I've ever made by far. And but I felt like it was really worth. It was really worth making sure that I felt like all the important considerations were considered. But I kind of I didn't want to give you the little preview at the beginning so that you knew what was going to happen. I kind of letting the different chapters unfold, because I think that hopefully for you the same. As a viewer, I don't like if you kind of blow everything in the first 5 minutes and then you kind of feel like you've seen it before already, because we've got short attention spans. I kind of like holding it and letting the journey take you around the corner.
But some of your storytelling, you're not obtrusive. Your presence is felt, but you're not detached either in the storytelling. Your voice is that it's a very unique approach. Was that difficult to find the balance between feeling your presence and your voice, and then at the same time withholding it?
Well, I was also going to point to the amazing Holly Becker, producer back there, who was really encouraging me to put myself in, because I'm very shy and I've never, I always say that my subjects are more interesting than me, and I always like hanging back, and I've never narrated before, and I never put myself in a film before. So that was new territory for me, and I have this funny, British American mixed up accent and all this thing, but then it turned out to be perfect. And the story actually about immigrating from Europe seemed apropos, and so I think it was when it crystallized, that realization that actually the story of a European coming to California and misunderstanding the landscape was in part what we were kind of looking at, that it sealed the deal. But it was new territory, and we edited a long time. It was tough to pull these stories together and also put me in it. So it was a complicated edit, and I felt like because there's a lot. Again, it's much easier as a filmmaker if you've got like one story to follow, but it turned out with this one that wasn't, I felt like, to do justice to the subject, you wanted to follow residents and firefighters, and you wanted to really look at things from different angles, because it's a complicated thing, and I really didn't want to reduce it to I just felt like it wouldn't honor anybody involved to simplify things.
But in the follow-up question is that it never feels didactic. The film, it feels very personal, and you, at the forefront, you put the firefighters and, of course, Brad and his mom. Can you tell us about that approach, that it doesn't feel didactic?
Well, I hope it's not didactic. Yeah, I hate judgy didactic things, because if we knew already, then why watch, right? If you could, what's that quote about? Like, if I had a message, I'd send a telegram, I think there's a lot to wonder at and wonder about, and I don't have the answers. I mean, personally, I couldn't stay in a fight. You heard me having a panic attack when the fire was miles away. I'm blown away by people that have the courage to stand there. And, my first instinct was, these people are bananas. Run, save yourself. Who are you? This is insanity. And yet, who am I to judge? And you look at Brad's story of him staying, and it was a miracle that he lived. I mean, I think that he was the only person in Paradise who stayed to defend his home and lived. There were others who didn't, and I couldn't interview them because they died. So I was very aware of my bias. And yet, when you watch Brad's story, who am I to tell him that he should have evacuated and lost that home? And so I don't know. I sort of, as a filmmaker, I kind of feel like if I knew the answer already, I wouldn't need to make the film. And I don't ever want to be reductive. I feel like the world is a big place, and I'm just one, brain trying to make sense of it. And I'm much more kind of interested in learning and curiosity than I am about answers and certainty, because I feel they're very, you should be very sparing with those things.
How soon did you meet Brad and understood that he would be such an important character, Brad and his mom?
Yeah. I never knew, at the beginning, if I was going to get chased off or like eaten alive by their dogs, or one of the guns would go off, or I'd be allowed back. But that was me with my anxiety, being very much outside my bubble, in a different crowd when I first got there. But he was very, very welcoming. That was just me being unsure. But I met him probably really quickly after we were shooting in Paradise, there weren't many people in Paradise. In fact, I think it was only his household that was still there. So I found him pretty quickly because the firefighter was like, there's one dude. And and even like, I think 9 months after the fire, there were 9 homes getting mail and having garbage taken away in Paradise, 9 months after the fire. So it was a thing. And, it's all in retrospect, it makes sense, but at the time you're just winging it. This is the, kind of filmmaking, it's me following my nose and in a car with, an amazing camera person, an amazing sound person, and just rocking around, trying to find some things to film. There's not like the researchers have got in there first and pre-interviewed and pre-selected and recommended no, this is like me thinking, what if we turn left here? I think there was this thing over there that looked kind of interesting yesterday. Oh, look, there's a person, let's stop and see if they want to say hi. I mean, it's like that. And so with Brad, though, that first scene was the first moment. You heard me, that the beginning of the movie is the beginning of me chatting to him. And and it was amazing that he volunteered that information. I had been filming already in Malibu. I'd filmed Malibu a few days before Paradise, and I'd also filmed some other people who'd lost their homes or stayed and defended. So I think I already had a question in my mind about, I'd already figured out that when people stayed to defend their homes, there was often a reason that was an emotional reason, that they weren't going to leave their home. And I was interested in those emotional reasons and interested in the fact that human beings are not the rational creatures that we sometimes like to think that we are. And I'd heard some really kind of extraordinary reasons why people had stayed in Malibu. So I kind of knew to ask that question, but it was actually very early in Paradise. But I didn't expect to hit this answer about that his late wife, and I was very moved by that, and I was very taken by his mom. It's just that her quality I found so riveting, and so I sometimes had this amazing filming feeling when I'm filming. Most of the time when you're making documentaries, it's kind of garbage. You're in the haystack and there's hay. There's just hay. You've spent days and you're just shooting this stuff and it's shoe leather, And then there's these moments and you have this giant check mark in your head and you think, that is going right in the film. I know that is going to be a scene. And it's a really wonderful, gratifying feeling that the work that you're doing that day is not going to go straight on the editing room floor, and there's a reason that you're out there, filming, especially in such a horrifying, discomforting, uncomfortable place as these disaster zones. When you're putting your crew through this horrible thing, and it's not like there's a cafe to go to, or even a bathroom, or even water that isn't filled with benzene. It was really gnarly stuff. And so those moments when you meet Brad and his mom, and you just knew that there was a story there that was electrifying. And I just kept going back, and he was always so welcoming, which was so great. Yeah.
You mentioned Malibu, and my follow-up question was about you split the narrative between the campfire and the Woolsey fire in Malibu. When did that happen, that you understood that you were going to split the narrative between the two locations? And you contrast the two places, and I love the subliminal or not subliminal politics that you bring up about the two places and the contrast between them. Yeah. When did that happen? Again,
it all looks very pre-planned. And actually, most of my films, people would imagine with documentaries that you didn't have a plan and you made it up as you go along. But actually, usually with my films, I do have a pretty good plan, and I have a real sense of the beginning, middle, and end. And with this one, I didn't. This one started out as a short film about the Thomas Fire, and look what you just watched. So it really did evolve, and it was simply that we had money, and I was already working and engaged, and already had figured out, and we had made friends with these incredible firefighters in Montecito, including Maeve. And so we were able really quickly in that incident to just call them up, and we knew how to embed, and we knew her, and we could just hop in and go. And we started out in Malibu, but of course, with the news coming in from Paradise, you couldn't help but want to be able to include that story as well, because it was such a sort of twin event. But at the time, you're just sort of gathering these scenes and these moments, and I was talking to these residents in both or people in both places, and thinking like, this is incredibly powerful, and just gathering it, and not quite sure how it would go together, but pretty sure it was really important material. And also, people, residents and respondents would airdrop typically, but would give me their material that they were filming. So all those, clips we didn't film ourselves, a lot of those clips inside the fires had been filmed by people on their smartphones, occasionally on cameras, and they were giving us their material as well. And they'd say, oh, I filmed myself during the incident. Do you want that material? So we're kind of gathering all this material. I knew it was really powerful stuff, and that we could edit it all together. But I didn't, the editing, I sort of worried about the editing later, and it wasn't even obvious at the beginning to me that actually we'd be able to really get away with the balance of the two. And I was actually still we got some wonderful footage about the Thomas Fire, actually, and the debris flow, and we filmed some amazing stuff with that, and the Bucket Brigade, and we filmed amazing stuff right here. And I thought that we'd include that in the film, and then we just, when you make a documentary, the edit is such a writing process, and the way that it seemed to work was having these contrasting events, because I did, and hopefully you'll agree, I found it quite illuminating that there are some real similarities and some real differences in how things sort of went down, and somehow having those twin events helped me really understand the big picture, like kind of binocular lenses or something.
Yeah, I mean, you show us the clip of Kim Kardashian and Ellen DeGeneres, and it comes across as this sort of self-centered strategy, and then in stark contrast with the campfire, and where...
I don't think it's self-centered. I actually don't have that judgment. Maybe the presenters do, and it seems like I do, but I don't even have that judgment. For me, it's just what it is,
No, you present it. I mean, it's up to us to interpret. Yeah. But it's there, and it's the stark differences. And yes, there are similarities, but there are stark contrasts as well between the two neighbor. I'm out of words now. The villages or areas.
Yeah.
Areas. There are things that we start uncovering, like, for example, the Frederick Law Olmsted that mentioned that we should just have simple cabins in these areas, et cetera. Were those things that you also were uncovering as you were doing your research in the film?
Well, I just thought it was all really interesting food for thought, all the considerations around building, where we're building and how we're building. And ultimately, for me, actually, it became really, and hopefully there's a case for optimism in here, because I'd gone into this thinking, we're toast, we're on this thermodynamic knife edge, we're falling off it with climate change, and, I don't want to burn up, this is terrifying, but seems to be the direction we're headed, and that correlation, as I mentioned again in the film, the correlation between the hottest summers and the worst fires seemed to be, causative. And I really thought case closed, climate change. This is, where climate change really comes and is already here and already hurting us right close to home, because I live, down the street in Venice Beach. And actually to learn that there are different ways of thinking about it, and whether it's where we build, how we plan, how we manage the fuels, how we think about and interact with our landscape. I actually found that tremendously interesting, and like all kinds of opportunities there to make sure that we can keep living in these beautiful places that we love. And I kind of feel like, and you probably know better than me because I'm so close to it, but I felt like even when you see with the town council meeting and stuff, that seems, rather dispiriting, right? But actually I felt like to crystallize the problem, I feel like we may not have solved the problem, but actually I feel like the problems are coming into focus. And I felt, again, there was a case for optimism about that we're sort of understanding what's going on better and where the real obstacles to living safely are. So is that the answer?
Yeah, absolutely. And also it was eye-opening to also see, and not surprising, the Native American wisdom about fires, and contrasted with the way that government has, the failure of fire suppression. Was that also a discovery for you?
Yeah, totally. And I had the same sort of instinct. My instinct was put those fires out. Or when I first heard, let's log more, you think, yes, the trees are burning us down. Get rid of the trees. Let's get on with it. The trees are the problem. And it was counterintuitive to me. It was opposite world to think, oh, okay, there's more to this logging business than I'd understood. And it's really worth getting into the detail and learning a little bit more, because that really changes the whole picture. And of course, actually, with all the stuff that you see in the film, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we explored a lot of other possible causes and had lots of other conversations and tried to really make sure that what you see here wasn't just the kind of first, theories about what was important or relevant, but actually really came out of a huge amount of sort of weighted research, if you like, and cross-checking and fact-checking, and just really try to really be very diligent and thorough and rigorous about what we're talking about, because there were also people who had some different theories about what was important and which factors to consider. I mean, some easily dismissible, like the laser, conspiracy theories or whatever. Laser pointer conspiracy theories came up in an amazing number of interviews, particularly in Malibu. But there are lots of other, really people very convinced that it was all the mayor's fault and the evacuation planning, and or it was the lack of the air raid sirens, or something, other piece of equipment had failed, or the firefighter error, and so on and so forth. And it was, this stuff is the stuff that really I felt really held up and was worth really, that was really interesting to me ultimately.
To me, the jaw-dropping scene is the one in the town council where you actually witnessed the American political paralysis, and you're in the front row, right there, witnessing.
That footage you see, by the way, was just sort of a little accidental. It wasn't that we were filming me expecting anything interesting to happen. I sat through a lot of boring town council meetings as my homework, expecting that they would never go in the film. We kind of rolled on them because we were there, and you may as well, and we were trying to really do our homework and cover every aspect of the story and really learn and absorb. And whenever it seemed like a really good forum to just listen. And so we'd go and film and listen, but I hadn't expected that to happen. And you sort of glimpse this moment, and you think, oh my gosh, that's it. That's why this cycle is repeating. And I thought that was a really amazing moment. And then we only had a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds of me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I look very, it's my resting bitch face, and I'm like, do we have to include that bit? I guess there's only a couple of seconds, it's gonna have to be. But it wasn't like we were filming me or expecting anything revelatory to happen. It was a really, boring, tiring Tuesday evening, and I was just sitting there, and the camera was rolling for a bit on that direction.
Yeah, the first 30 minutes is so incredible. Tell us about how were you able to get all that footage of the fire from all you get from all different angles and.
Well, I mean, people. It's amazing, isn't it, that people are filming so much these days, and so some of it was posted, but a lot of it wasn't posted. But people were filming it, and then they'd say, "Oh, I can show you what I filmed," and then they'd airdrop it to us. Some of it was we were able to file Freedom of Information requests to get the 911 calls and the first responder radio traffic. And obviously it's really harrowing. There are haystacks you sift through when you're editing, and then there are, scenes this sort of traumatic and harrowing. So it was quite a thing to be going through those 911 calls, for example, and, really just feel what people were going through. And and then I felt really concerned I questioned a lot about, I didn't want to be gratuitous with it because, I didn't want to make a horrible horror movie out of real people's trauma to show off my filmmaking skills or something. But I felt that it was really important that people understood quite how terrible it is. And it is, you as a community, I think, know so well how frightening it can be. But it's so easy, when I was filming in Malibu, you cross the line from one block to the next, and everyone in Santa Monica is business as usual. And you're like 2 blocks over there, it's Armageddon, and people have lost their homes and their businesses and their incomes, and they're, are injured and so forth. And I mean, it's hell on earth over there, and I felt like it was important to communicate quite how bad it was, because and that, again, I think that was another. But I also, to your point about your first question about wanting the film having different chapters, I did feel like, well, once we've done that, maybe we can move on, and we don't need trauma reprise there. I think we've had the trauma. Let's follow it through and understand what just happened. And I felt that it was really illuminating that when you see that town council meeting, you really remember how bad it was, that this was not, a minor scare or something. This was the most horrifying scenes you can imagine, and yet that still hadn't motivated people to do more to prevent it happening again. And by the way, the Dixie Fire, which you may be aware of, started right there on Camp Creek Road, which the campfire was named after, off of Highway 70 in the Feather River Canyon. Very likely, I think it's PG&E Electrical Tower, probably like the next door one or something. I mean, it's an identical area and ignition. It just happened to blow northeast instead of west, because the wind was blowing an unusual way that day. So, and that's huge. The Dixie Fire is, roaring up the top 10 fire charts or whatever. It's about to go into the top 10 California fire charts. And that's exactly the same incident right now. Not exactly the same incident, but in Paradise, Zeke, our wonderful guy who has lots of great comments, is evacuated right now. A lot of the people in the film are evacuated right now. I'm getting Facebook messages with photos of the smoke, and everyone's very, it's happening again right now. It also, 23 people, I think, were killed in the fire last summer that burned right up to the scar. So you don't want to be proven right with your thesis that these fires happen all the time. But 2 years after the campfire, we had 23 people killed in Butte County adjacent, really burned up to the campfire scar. And now again, it still may go into paradise. It started, I said, in exactly the same ignition point. It's spread a different direction, but it's huge and might burn for a long time and really do a lot of damage, that fire. So, and actually Maeve is on that fire right now. A lot of the firefighters and the here are on that fire right now. So it's really all too validated or something like that. You don't want to be proven right with a film like this, I think.
Yeah. And last question, you have all this footage, you did all this filming, how long did it take for you to put it all together, to edit it? And
yeah, this was a slog, and it was, and thank you for watching it. It is, as I said, it's kind of a complicated and demanding film, and maybe it's a complicated and demanding subject, but I felt like that was I wanted it to be right and helpful and true, and I've had quicker and easier edits. I wasn't working on this exclusively all the time. There were some other projects and different things along the way, but the whole journey was from the Thomas Fire, which sparked December 2017.
correct.
So 3.5 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's a terrific film, and thank you so much, Lucy, for being
Thank you.
here.
Thanks for being here.
Congratulations. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for staying.